Millionaire left her husband. 14 years later, she saw him at the airport with a young woman who looked like her. The sun filtered through the wide windows of the luxurious suite at the Waldorf Astoria in New York City, illuminating the figure of Elizabeth Sinclair, a 45-year-old woman whose beauty still shone despite the passage of time. Her deep green eyes gazed distractedly at the bustle of the Big Apple from her privileged position on the 15th floor. Elizabeth sighed, her fingers absently caressing the expensive pearl necklace adorning her neck. Despite being surrounded by luxury and opulence, a feeling of emptiness constantly pursued her, like a shadow that refused to leave. "Mrs. Sinclair, your limousine is ready," announced her personal assistant, Sarah, interrupting her thoughts. Elizabeth nodded, picking up her designer handbag. "Thank you, Sarah. Make sure everything is ready for our departure to Los Angeles this afternoon." As she descended in the elevator, Elizabeth mentally reviewed her tight schedule, meetings with investors, business dinners, charity events. Her life was a whirlwind of activities and commitments, but still, she felt that something was missing, something important that she couldn't identify. The trip to John F. Kennedy International Airport was uneventful. Elizabeth, accustomed to moving among the international elite, walked with the confidence that years of success in the business world had given her. However, upon reaching the VIP boarding area, something caught her attention. A man in his 50s, with graying hair and brown eyes, was standing next to a young girl of about 14. For some reason she couldn't explain, Elizabeth felt an instant connection with them. The man seemed strangely familiar, as if she had seen him in a distant dream. Intrigued, Elizabeth approached discreetly, pretending to check her phone while straining her ear to listen to their conversation. "Dad, are you sure Mom won't be coming with us?" asked the young girl, with a hint of sadness in her voice. The man sighed, running a hand through the girl's hair. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. You know your mother. Well, she hasn't been with us for a long time." Elizabeth felt a pang in her chest upon hearing those words. Without knowing why, her eyes filled with tears. Confused by her own reaction, she took a step back, accidentally bumping into a luggage cart. The noise attracted the attention of the man and the young girl. When their eyes met, Elizabeth felt as if the world had stopped. The man's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and recognition flooding his face. "Elizabeth," he whispered, his voice barely audible in the bustle of the airport. Elizabeth's mind went into chaos. How did he know her name? Why did she feel like she knew him? And that young girl, why was her heart beating so fast at the sight of her? Before she could respond, a flash of pain shot through her head. Confused images flooded her mind. A wedding, a crying baby, a hospital. Overwhelmed, Elizabeth stepped back, bringing her hands to her temples. "I'm sorry, I have to go," she stammered, turning on her heels and quickly walking away, ignoring the man's calls. As she hurried to her boarding gate, Elizabeth felt the ground moving beneath her feet. Who were those people? And why did she feel like she had just left behind a crucial part of her life? Already on the plane, looking out the window as New York faded away, Elizabeth made a decision. She needed answers. Something had awakened in her, a longing she couldn't ignore. "Sarah," she called to her assistant, "I need you to contact the best private detective in Los Angeles. I have a job for him." As the plane rose into the sky, Elizabeth Sinclair, the powerful millionaire, felt she was on the brink of a discovery that would change her life forever. What she didn't know was that this casual encounter at the airport was just the beginning of a journey that would lead her to face a forgotten past and an uncertain future. The skyscraper housing Sinclair Industries, offices towered over the Los Angeles skyline. On the 50th floor, Elizabeth Sinclair observed the city at her feet, her mind still agitated by the events in New York. "Mrs. Sinclair, Detective Thompson has arrived," Sarah announced through the intercom. Elizabeth took a deep breath, preparing herself for what she was about to do. "Send him in." Detective John Thompson entered the office, his sharp gaze assessing the luxurious surroundings. "Mrs. Sinclair, it's a pleasure to meet you. I was told you have an unusual case." Elizabeth nodded, indicating for him to take a seat. "Detective Thompson, I need you to investigate my past, specifically the last 15 years of my life. Thompson raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Your own past, Ma'am. That's uncommon. I know, Elizabeth replied, her voice trembling slightly. 2 days ago, in New York, I encountered a man and a young girl. I felt a connection with them. And then I had visions. Memories I can't explain. The detective took out a notebook, beginning to take notes. Can you describe these people? Elizabeth closed her eyes, concentrating. The man, about 50 years old, graying hair, brown eyes. The young girl, around 14 years old, looked like him and me. Her voice broke at the end. Thompson looked at her curiously. Mrs. Sinclair, are you suggesting that this young girl could be your daughter? I don't know, Elizabeth admitted, frustration evident in her voice. I don't remember having a daughter, but there are so many things I don't remember. The detective frowned, thoughtful. Have you considered the possibility that you might be suffering from some form of amnesia? Elizabeth stood up, walking towards the window. I've been under the care of the best doctors for years. I was diagnosed with a degenerative disease a long time ago, but they never mentioned amnesia. Interesting, Thompson muttered. And what about your family, childhood friends? I don't have family, Elizabeth responded automatically, but then hesitated. At least, that's what I've always believed, and my childhood memories are blurry. The detective nodded, taking more notes. Mrs. Sinclair, this is going to require a thorough investigation. I'll need access to your medical records, financials, everything. Elizabeth turned to him, her gaze determined. You'll have it. I want answers, detective, whatever it costs. Meanwhile, in a modest apartment in Santa Monica, Andrew Parker, the man from the airport, stared intently at an old photograph. In it, a young and radiant Elizabeth held a baby, while he embraced her. Dad, are you okay? Asked Emma, his daughter, entering the room. Andrew tried to smile, but his eyes were full of tears. Yes, honey. Just remembering. Emma sat next to him, looking at the photo. It was her, wasn't it? The woman at the airport. It was Mom. Andrew nodded slowly. Yes, it was her, after all these years. But she didn't recognize us, said Emma, the sadness evident in her voice. Why, Dad? Why did she abandon us? Andrew hugged his daughter, his heart torn between the pain of the past and the unexpected hope of the present. I don't know, my love, but we're going to find out. Back in her office, Elizabeth was preparing for an important video conference when another sharp pain hit her. This time, the vision was clearer. She was in a hospital room, holding a baby. Beside her, the man from the airport smiled with tears in his eyes. Gasping, Elizabeth clung to her desk. Was this memory real? Or was her mind playing a cruel trick on her? At that moment, Sarah rushed in. Mrs. Sinclair, we have a problem. The Securities and Exchange Commission is investigating some of our recent transactions. Elizabeth, still stunned by the vision, took a moment to process the information. What? Why wasn't I informed earlier? I just found out, explained Sarah, visibly nervous. It seems there are some discrepancies in our financial reports from the last 5 years. Elizabeth felt the ground moving beneath her feet. Not only was she dealing with a mysterious past, but now her present was also in danger. How could there be discrepancies? She had always been meticulous with her business. Cancel the video conference, Elizabeth ordered, her mind working at full speed. And call our legal team. We need to be prepared for whatever the commission is looking for. As Sarah hurried out to comply with her orders, Elizabeth slumped into her chair, overwhelmed. Her life, which had seemed so perfect and controlled just a few days ago, was now crumbling around her. Who was Elizabeth Sinclair, really? What secrets did her past hide? And more importantly, how would these secrets affect her future? With her head in her hands, Elizabeth made a decision. No matter what it cost, she was going to uncover the truth about her past, about her family, and about the mysterious financial problems that threatened to destroy everything she had built. What she didn't know was that this search for truth would lead her down a path filled with painful revelations, impossible decisions, and perhaps a chance for redemption she never thought possible. The morning sun was barely peeking over the horizon when Elizabeth Sinclair entered her office. The dark circles under her eyes revealed nights of insomnia and worry. On her desk, a pile of documents awaited her. The first results of Detective Thompson's investigation. With trembling hands, Elizabeth began to read. Each page was like a stab to her heart, revealing a life she didn't remember living. Marriage certificate. Andrew Parker and Elizabeth Sinclair, she murmured, her eyes fixed on the date, 15 years ago. Birth certificate, Emma Parker Sinclair. Tears began to fall on the documents. It was true. She had a daughter, a family she had forgotten. At that moment, Sarah rushed in. "Mrs. Sinclair, the lawyers are here. The SEC investigation has intensified." Elizabeth barely heard her. Her mind was in chaos, trying to reconcile the woman she believed herself to be with this new reality. "Sarah," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper, "cancel all my meetings. I need time." Meanwhile, in the modest Santa Monica apartment, Andrew Parker received an unexpected call. "Mr. Parker, this is Detective John Thompson. I'm investigating for Elizabeth Sinclair and—" Andrew felt his heart stop. "Elizabeth, she hired you. Why?" "Mr. Parker, I think we should meet in person. There's a lot to discuss." Hours later, in a discreet cafe, Andrew listened attentively to the detective. Each word was like an emotional roller coaster. Hope, pain, confusion. "Are you saying that Elizabeth didn't intentionally abandon us?" Andrew asked, his voice broken. "Gather that she really doesn't remember us." Thompson nodded gravely. "The medical records indicate a progressive neurological condition. It seems she experienced a severe episode shortly after your daughter's birth. Amnesia was an unexpected side effect." Andrew ran a hand over his face and were overwhelmed. "All these years, I thought she had left us by choice." "There's more," Thompson continued. "Mrs. Sinclair's condition has worsened. Doctors believe she could lose even more memory in the coming years." At that moment, Andrew's phone rang. It was Emma. "Dad, where are you? There are reporters outside the apartment. They're asking about Mom and something about financial fraud." Andrew's world reeled. Fraud? Elizabeth? Meanwhile, at Sinclair Industries offices, chaos reigned. Federal agents were coming and going, taking boxes of documents. Elizabeth, seated in her office, watched with a mixture of shock and resignation. Her lawyer, a middle-aged man named Robert, entered with a grim expression. "Elizabeth, things don't look good. They've found evidence of financial manipulation dating back years. They're talking about arrests." Elizabeth looked at him, her eyes full of confusion and fear. "But I don't remember doing anything illegal." Robert sighed. "I know. But the evidence—" "Elizabeth, someone has been using your company to launder money, and all the clues point to you." At that moment, Sarah rushed in. "Mrs. Sinclair, I just saw the news. They're talking about your family, about your daughter." Elizabeth stood up abruptly. "What? How did they find out?" "I don't know," Sarah replied, pale. "But they're everywhere. The story of the millionaire who abandoned her family is on all channels." Elizabeth felt the world closing in around her. Her forgotten past and her present crisis were colliding in the worst possible way. "I need to see them," she said suddenly. "Andrew and Emma, I need to explain." "Elizabeth," Robert interrupted, "you can't leave now. The police will be here any moment." But Elizabeth was no longer listening. With a determination she didn't know she possessed, she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "Sarah, get me Andrew Parker's address." "But Mrs. Sinclair, now!" As Elizabeth hurriedly left the building, evading the reporters already gathering at the entrance, she didn't realize that someone was watching her from the shadows, a figure who had been manipulating the strings of her life for years, and who now saw how his careful plan was beginning to crumble. In the taxi on the way to Santa Monica, Elizabeth struggled against another wave of fragmented memories. Images of a happy life with Andrew and a baby Emma mixed with confusing scenes of hospitals and heated arguments. What had really happened? And how could she fix it now, when everything seemed to be falling apart? What Elizabeth didn't know was that her journey to Santa Monica would not only confront her with her forgotten past, but would also put her on the path of a danger that had been lurking in the shadows for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The taxi stopped in front of a modest apartment building in Santa Monica. Elizabeth Sinclair, her heart racing, looked at the address Sarah had provided. This was the home of Andrew and Emma, the family she had forgotten. With trembling steps, she approached the entrance. The reporters Andrew had mentioned were no longer there, but Elizabeth could feel the curious glances of the neighbors. She took a deep breath and pressed the buzzer for apartment 3B. A few seconds passed that seemed eternal. Finally, the door opened, revealing Andrew Parker. His eyes widened at the sight of her. "Elizabeth," he whispered, his voice a mixture of shock and longing. "Andrew," she responded, tears forming in her eyes. I need to talk to you." Before Andrew could respond, a voice interrupted from inside the apartment. "Dad, who is it?" Emma appeared behind her father, and upon seeing Elizabeth, her expression went from curiosity to recognition and then to anger. "What is she doing here?" Emma spat, her voice laden with emotion. Andrew, visibly uncomfortable, looked from Elizabeth to Emma. "I think we should talk inside." Once in the small living room, the silence was palpable. Elizabeth looked around, trying to absorb every detail of the life she had lost. Photos of Emma growing up adorned the walls, moments she had never experienced. "Why are you here?" Andrew finally asked, breaking the silence. Elizabeth took a deep breath. I don't remember. Andrew, Emma, there's so much I don't remember. I have a condition, an illness that affects my memory. I didn't abandon you by choice, I simply forgot." Emma let out a bitter laugh. "You expect us to believe that you conveniently forgot you had a family while building your empire." "Emma," Andrew warned, but Elizabeth raised a hand. "No, she's right to be angry. I can't imagine what you've been through." Elizabeth took out the documents Detective Thompson had gathered. "But it's the truth. I have a degenerative disease that affects my memory. After your birth, Emma, I had a severe episode. I lost years of memories." Andrew took the documents, reviewing them with a grave expression. Emma, however, didn't seem convinced. "So what? You expect everything to be fixed now?" "That will be a happy family?" Emma questioned, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Elizabeth shook her head. "No, I don't know what I expect. I just know I needed to see you, to explain. Especially now that everything is coming to light." "You mean the fraud?" Andrew asked, his voice tinged with concern. "Elizabeth, what's really going on?" Before Elizabeth could answer, the sound of sirens filled the air. Through the window, they saw several police cars stopping in front of the building. "Oh, God," Elizabeth murmured, paling. "They found me." Andrew peeked out the window. "Elizabeth, what have you done?" "Nothing. At least, not that I remember," she responded, desperation evident in her voice. "Someone has been using my company to launder money, but it wasn't me, not consciously." Emma, who had been listening with a mixture of confusion and anger, suddenly spoke. "Wait, it'll give you time to escape." "But—" "Go," Andrew insisted. "Find the truth, Elizabeth, for all of us." With her heart in her throat, Elizabeth looked at Emma. The young woman seemed to be struggling with her emotions, but finally nodded. "Thank you," Elizabeth whispered, tears running down her cheeks. Quickly, she headed to the bedroom and out the window. As she descended the fire escape, she could hear the police entering the apartment. The weight of what Andrew and Emma were sacrificing for her wasn't lost on her. Already in the alley, Elizabeth blended with the crowd that had formed to watch the police spectacle. Her mind was working at full speed. Who could be behind all this? Who had taken advantage of her condition to use her company for illegal purposes? As she walked hurriedly, with no fixed direction, a fleeting memory crossed her mind. A smiling face, a hand on her shoulder, a voice saying, "Don't worry about anything, Elizabeth. I'll take care of everything." She stopped in her tracks. Could it be? Was the person she trusted most responsible for her downfall? With renewed determination, Elizabeth took out her phone. She had a call to make. "Detective Thompson, it's Elizabeth Sinclair. I need your help. I think I know who's behind all this." Meanwhile, in a luxurious office in downtown Los Angeles, a figure watched the news with a satisfied smile. Elizabeth Sinclair's downfall was on every channel. However, that smile vanished when an assistant rushed in. "Sir, we have a problem. Elizabeth Sinclair has escaped from the police." The figure stood up, his face a mask of fury. "Find her, and this time make sure she can't cause any more problems." The game had changed. The hunt had begun, and at the center of it all, a woman fought not only for her freedom, but to recover the life that had been stolen from her. Night had fallen over Los Angeles when Elizabeth Sinclair found herself in a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. Her heart was still pounding after the escape from Andrew's apartment. Across from her, Detective John Thompson looked at her with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Mrs. Sinclair," Thompson began, "I understand you believe you know who's behind all this, but you must understand that you're now a fugitive. I can't protect you from the law." Elizabeth nodded, her eyes full of determination. "I know, Detective, but I need you to listen to what I have to say. I believe the person responsible for all this is someone very close to me, someone I trusted blindly for years." Thompson leaned forward, intrigued. "Who?" "My executive vice president, Richard Blackwood," Elizabeth replied, her voice barely a whisper. "He's been with me from the beginning, handling much of the company's daily operations. If anyone had the access and opportunity to manipulate our finances, it was him." The detective frowned, processing the information. "That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Sinclair. Do you have any proof?" Elizabeth closed her eyes, fighting against the frustration of her fragmented memory. "I don't have concrete evidence, Detective, but I remember fragments. Conversations where Richard assured me he would take care of everything. Documents I signed without fully understanding their content because I trusted him." Thompson took notes quickly. "I understand your theory, but we need more than vague memories to build a case." At that moment, Elizabeth's phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. "If you want the truth, go to Warehouse 17 at the port. Midnight. Come alone." Elizabeth showed the message to Thompson, who immediately became alert. "Mrs. Sinclair, you can't go alone. It's clearly a trap. But it could be our only chance to get evidence," Elizabeth argued. "Detective, I know I'm risking you by helping me. I won't ask you to get more involved. I'll go alone, but I'll keep you informed." Thompson seemed to want to protest, but finally nodded. "Be careful, and remember, if things get ugly, call the police immediately." Meanwhile, in the Parkers' apartment, Andrew and Emma were facing their own consequences. The police officers had just left after interrogating them about Elizabeth's whereabouts. "Do you think we did the right thing, Dad?" Emma asked, her voice laden with emotion. "Helping her escape, I mean." Andrew sighed, hugging his daughter. "I don't know, honey, but your mother, Elizabeth, deserves the chance to prove her innocence. You saw the documents. She's been sick all this time." Emma nodded slowly. "It's just that, all these years, I thought she had abandoned us by choice. And now we have the chance to discover the truth," Andrew completed, "whatever that truth may be." In Richard Blackwood's luxurious penthouse, the executive vice president of Sinclair Industries observed the city with a glass of whiskey in his hand. His phone rang. "Is it done?" he asked without preamble. "Yes, sir," a voice replied on the other end. Sinclair received the message. "We'll be waiting for her at the warehouse." Richard smiled. "Excellent. Make sure she doesn't leave there alive. She's already caused too many problems." He hung up the phone, unaware that someone else had heard the conversation. Sarah, Elizabeth's personal assistant, silently left from behind a column, her face pale from what she had just discovered. Meanwhile, Elizabeth was heading to the port, her mind a whirlwind of emotions and fragmented memories. As she approached Warehouse 17, another memory hit her hard. She was in a hospital room holding newborn Emma. Richard was there, smiling. "Don't worry about anything, Elizabeth," he was saying. "I'll take care of everything while you recover. You just focus on getting better." Elizabeth gasped, stopping in her tracks. Had that been the moment when it all began, when Richard started taking control of her life and her company? With renewed determination, she continued towards the warehouse. However, she didn't notice that two figures were following her at a distance. Andrew and Emma, having decided they couldn't stand idly by, had managed to track her down. "Are you sure about this, Emma?" Andrew whispered as they approached the warehouse. Emma nodded. "We need to know the truth, Dad, for all of us." In the warehouse, Elizabeth cautiously entered. The place was dark and apparently empty. Suddenly, the lights came on, momentarily blinding her. "Welcome, Elizabeth," said a familiar voice. Richard Blackwood emerged from the shadows, a cold smile on his face. "I'm glad to see you still trust me enough to come alone." Elizabeth looked at him, a mixture of pain and fury in her eyes. "Why, Richard? Why did you betray me?" Richard laughed. "Betray you, my dear Elizabeth? I gave you everything. I built your empire while you were too sick to function. Do you think you would have come this far without me?" "At the cost of my family, my freedom," Elizabeth replied, her voice trembling. "Necessary sacrifices," Richard responded coldly. "But now, I'm afraid you've become too big a problem to handle." He made a gesture, and two armed men came out of the shadows. Elizabeth backed away, desperately looking for a way out. At that moment, the warehouse door burst open. "Police! Everyone on the ground!" Detective Thompson entered, followed by a SWAT team. Richard and his men were quickly subdued. Elizabeth looked at Thompson, surprised. "I thought I told you not to get involved." The detective smiled. "And I told you to be careful. Besides, I had a little help." Sarah entered the warehouse, followed by Andrew and Emma. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sinclair," said Sarah. "I overheard Richard planning this. I couldn't stand by and do nothing." Elizabeth looked at her family, tears in her eyes. "Andrew, Emma, why?" Emma stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "Because you're our mother, and although it will take time to fully forgive, we want the chance to get to know you, the real you." As Richard was handcuffed and led away, shouting threats and accusations, Elizabeth found herself surrounded by the people who really mattered. Her family, who against all odds, was willing to give her a second chance. But as relief washed over her, another sharp pain shot through her head. Memories, good and bad, began to flood her mind. Elizabeth staggered, held up by Andrew. "Elizabeth, are you okay?" he asked, concerned. She looked at him, her eyes full of recognition and love. "Andrew, I remember everything." And as sirens sounded in the distance and dawn began to peek through the warehouse windows, Elizabeth Sinclair realized that this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one full of challenges, but also of hope and redemption. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of the hospital room where Elizabeth Sinclair was resting. The events of the previous night had left her exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Beside her, Andrew dozed in an uncomfortable chair, while Emma absently flipped through a magazine. A soft knock on the door interrupted the silence. Detective Thompson entered, his expression a mixture of weariness and satisfaction. "Good morning," he greeted quietly. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Sinclair?" Elizabeth slowly sat up, waking Andrew in the process. "Better, thank you, although I'm still trying to process everything that's happened." Thompson nodded understandingly. "It's understandable. It's been an intense few days." He took out a small notebook from his pocket. "If you feel up to it, I'd like to ask you a few questions. With Richard Blackwood's confession and the evidence we've gathered, we're closing the case, but your recovered memories could be crucial." Elizabeth looked at Andrew and Emma, who nodded in support. "I'm ready," she said with determination. For the next hour, Elizabeth recounted everything she could remember. She spoke of how, shortly after Emma's birth, she began experiencing symptoms of her neurological disease. Richard, who was already her right-hand man in the company, offered to help with business matters while she recovered. "At first, I was grateful," Elizabeth explained, her voice tinged with bitterness. But Richard took advantage of my vulnerability. Little by little, he isolated me from Andrew and Emma, convincing me that I needed to focus solely on my recovery and the company. Andrew took her hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I remember those days. You were trying to balance your health, motherhood, and work. Richard was always there, offering help, but also creating distance between us. Elizabeth nodded, squeezing Andrew's hand. Over time, my episodes of memory loss became more frequent. Richard used that to his advantage, manipulating documents and business decisions. He even convinced me that I had chosen to leave my family for the good of the company. Emma, who had been listening in silence, spoke for the first time. How could he do something like that? Why? Detective Thompson intervened. According to our investigation, Richard had been diverting funds from Sinclair Industries for years. He used your mother's condition to cover up his illegal activities and, at the same time, take effective control of the company. Elizabeth closed her eyes, fighting against a new wave of memories. There were moments of clarity when I questioned what was happening, but Richard always had an explanation, always convinced me that he was acting in my best interest. And what about the last few days? Thompson asked. How did you start to suspect? It was the encounter at the airport, Elizabeth replied, looking at Andrew and Emma with a mixture of love and regret. Seeing you triggered something in me, memories, emotions that I had repressed for years. And then, when the fraud investigation began, the pieces started to fit together. Thompson took notes quickly. This will be of great help in closing the case against Blackwood. Mrs. Sinclair, I want you to know that, given the circumstances and your cooperation, it's unlikely that charges will be filed against you. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. However, Elizabeth's expression remained somber. Thank you, Detective. But that doesn't change the fact that I allowed this to happen, that I abandoned my family, that I lost years that I can never get back. Andrew leaned towards her, his voice soft but firm. Elizabeth, you can't blame yourself for Richard's actions. You were a victim, just like us. Emma, after a moment of hesitation, approached the bed. Mom, she said, the words sounding strange but comforting. I spent years angry, thinking you had abandoned us by choice, but now I understand that those years were stolen from you too. Maybe we can try to recover some of that lost time. Tears were flowing freely down Elizabeth's cheeks. She extended her arms, and for the first time in 14 years, she hugged her daughter. Andrew joined the embrace, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Detective Thompson, sensing the intimacy of the moment, silently headed towards the door. But before leaving, he turned one last time. Mrs. Sinclair, there's something else you should know. During our investigation, we discovered that Richard had been hiding information about experimental treatments for your condition, treatments that could have significantly slowed the progress of your disease. Elizabeth looked at him, surprised. What? Why would he do that? Control, Thompson replied simply. As long as you were sick and dependent, he maintained power. But now you have the opportunity to explore those options. With those words, the detective left, leaving the Sinclair Parker family to process this new information. Elizabeth looked at Andrew and Emma, a spark of hope shining in her eyes for the first time in years. Perhaps it's not too late for a new beginning. Andrew smiled, softly kissing her forehead. It's never too late, my love. Emma, still embraced by her mother, nodded. We're together now. That's what matters. As sunlight flooded the room, Elizabeth Sinclair realized that although the road ahead would be difficult, she was no longer alone. She had her family. The truth was coming to light, and for the first time in years, she felt she truly had a future to fight for. However, in the quietness of that moment of hope, none of them could imagine the new challenges that fate still had in store for the Sinclair Parker family. 6 months had passed since the dramatic night at the warehouse. The life of the Sinclair Parker family had taken a 180-degree turn. Elizabeth, after being exonerated of all charges, had undergone experimental treatment for her neurological condition. Although it wasn't a cure, the doctors were optimistic about its ability to slow the progression of the disease. It was a sunny Sunday afternoon, and the family was gathered in the garden of the new house they had bought together in the suburbs of Los Angeles. Andrew was preparing a barbecue, while Emma and Elizabeth chatted animatedly about the young woman's college plans. "Are you sure you want to study law?" Elizabeth asked, a playful smile on her lips. "I thought after everything we went through, you'd want to stay as far away from courtrooms as possible." Emma laughed, shaking her head. "On the contrary, Mum, everything that happened made me realize how important it is to fight for justice. I want to help people who, like you, have been victims of manipulation and fraud." Elizabeth felt her eyes filling with tears. She still couldn't believe how understanding and strong her daughter was. "I'm so proud of you." "Sweetheart," Andrew approached, carrying a plate full of burgers, the women of my life always having deep conversations. "How about we forget about problems for a while and enjoy this meal?" Just as they were about to eat, Elizabeth's phone rang. It was Sarah, her faithful assistant who now held a senior management position in the restructured Sinclair Industries. "Elizabeth, I'm sorry to bother you on Sunday, but we have a situation." Sarah's voice sounded tense. "I just received a notification. Richard Blackwood has been released on bail." The world seemed to stop for Elizabeth. "What? How is that possible?" "Apparently, his legal team found a technicality. They're arguing that part of the evidence was obtained illegally," Sarah explained. "Elizabeth, there's more. We've received reports that he's trying to contact former employees and partners of the company." Elizabeth closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the world falling on her shoulders again. "Thank you for letting me know, Sarah. Keep me informed of any new developments." When she hung up, she found Andrew and Emma's worried looks. "What's going on, Mum?" Emma asked, concern evident in her voice. Elizabeth took a deep breath before sharing the news. The silence that followed was deafening. "It can't be," Andrew muttered, barely contained anger in his voice. "After everything he did, how can they let him out?" Emma, always practical, was the first to recover from the shock. "What can we do? There must be some way to fight this." Elizabeth nodded slowly. "You're right, sweetheart. We won't sit idly by. First thing tomorrow morning, I'll meet with our lawyers. If Richard thinks he can threaten our family or the company again, he's very wrong." Despite her brave words, Elizabeth couldn't help but feel a pang of fear. The memories of her manipulation at Richard's hands were still fresh in her mind. What if she fell for his deceptions again? What if her illness worsened and left her vulnerable once more? As if reading her thoughts, Andrew took her hand. "You're not alone in this, Elizabeth. This time we're together. Richard doesn't stand a chance against the three of us." Emma joined the embrace. "Dad's right. We're stronger together. And now that I know the truth, I won't let anyone separate us again." Elizabeth felt tears running down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of gratitude and love. "I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I promise I'll fight with all my strength to protect what we have." The rest of the afternoon passed in a state of tense alertness. While Andrew and Emma tried to maintain an appearance of normalcy, Elizabeth couldn't stop thinking about Richard's possible moves. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Elizabeth and Andrew stayed up, discussing their options. "Maybe we should consider moving," Andrew suggested. "Start over somewhere else, away from all this." Elizabeth shook her head. "No, Andrew. We've worked too hard to rebuild our lives here. I won't let Richard take that away from us too." "Then what's the plan?" Elizabeth stood up, walking to the window. The city sparkled in the distance, a reminder of everything she had built and lost, and now fought to recover. "We're going to fight," she said with determination. "But this time, we'll do it smartly. Richard thinks he knows me, that he can predict my moves. But he forgets that I'm no longer the vulnerable woman he manipulated for years." Andrew joined her at the window, embracing her from behind. "And who are you now, Elizabeth Sinclair?" She turned to look at him, a spark of determination in her eyes. "I'm a woman who has recovered her past, who values her present, and who will fight tooth and nail for her future. I'm a wife, a mother, and a businesswoman." and it's time for Richard Blackwood to learn that messing with my family is the worst mistake he could have made. As the night progressed, Elizabeth and Andrew began to devise a plan. They knew the coming days would be difficult, that Richard Blackwood's shadow threatened to darken the happiness they had worked so hard to recover. But they also knew that this time they were prepared, united, and stronger than ever. What they didn't know was that Richard Blackwood was also planning his next move. In the darkness of his study, the former vice president of Sinclair Industries smiled as he reviewed old files and documents. "Enjoy your freedom while you can, Elizabeth," he muttered to himself. "Because when I'm done with you, you'll wish you had never recovered your memory." The board was set, the pieces in place, the final game was about to begin, and only one would emerge victorious. The sun was rising over the Los Angeles horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Elizabeth Sinclair observed the dawn from the window of her office in the Sinclair Industries skyscraper. The last few months had been an emotional roller coaster and full of challenges, but today was the day when everything would come to an end. "Mrs. Sinclair," Sarah's voice interrupted her thoughts, "the legal team is ready for the meeting." Elizabeth nodded, taking a deep breath before following her assistant. In the boardroom, a group of lawyers and executives awaited her, along with Andrew and Emma. "Good morning, everyone," Elizabeth greeted, her voice firm and determined. "As you know, today is the day we'll present our evidence against Richard Blackwood. But before we proceed, there's something you need to know." Everyone in the room leaned forward, intrigued. "During the past few months, while Richard believed he was gaining ground, we've been conducting our own investigation," Elizabeth continued. "And what we've discovered goes far beyond what we initially thought." With a gesture, she indicated to Sarah to distribute some folders. "What you have before you is evidence of a corruption network that extends far beyond Sinclair Industries. Richard wasn't acting alone. He had accomplices in other companies, in the government, even in the judicial system." A murmur of amazement ran through the room. Andrew took Elizabeth's hand, squeezing it in support. "How did we obtain this information?" one of the lawyers asked, flipping through the documents in disbelief. Elizabeth smiled, a flash of her old spirit shining in her eyes. "Let's say Richard isn't the only one who knows how to play chess. While he was busy trying to discredit me and regain control of the company, we were following the money trail, unearthing old secrets, and connecting the dots." Emma, who had been silent until that moment, spoke up. "I helped," she said proudly. "My internship at the law firm wasn't just for my career. I was investigating old cases, looking for patterns." Elizabeth looked at her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. "Emma has been invaluable in this investigation. Her fresh perspective helped us see things we had overlooked." "But what about today's hearing?" another executive asked. "How does this affect our case against Blackwood?" "That's the best part," Andrew replied, unable to contain a smile. "Richard thinks he has the upper hand. He thinks he's going to walk into that courtroom and discredit Elizabeth, maybe even regain control of the company. But what he doesn't know," Elizabeth continued, "is that we're not just fighting against his accusations. We're unmasking the entire operation, and we have the support of federal authorities." At that moment, as if on cue, Detective Thompson entered the room, accompanied by several FBI agents. "Mrs. Sinclair," Thompson greeted with a nod. "Everything is ready. The teams are in position to make simultaneous arrests as soon as we give the signal." Elizabeth felt a shiver run down her spine. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the result of months of secret work and careful planning. "Very well," she said, straightening up. "It's time to put an end to this once and for all." As the group prepared to leave for the courthouse, Elizabeth paused for a moment, looking at her family. Andrew, her rock, the man who never stopped believing in her even when she had forgotten herself, and Emma, her brave and brilliant daughter, who had gone from being a hurt teenager to a determined young woman fighting for justice. "I love you both so much," Elizabeth whispered, embracing them. "Whatever happens today, I want you to know that you are the most important thing in my life." "We know, Mom," Emma replied, with tears in her eyes, "and we're in this together. To the end." Andrew softly kissed Elizabeth's forehead. "Always," he promised. With one last hug, the Sinclair Parker family headed towards the final battle. The courthouse was packed when they arrived. Richard Blackwood was already there, surrounded by his lawyers, a confident smile on his face. When he saw Elizabeth enter, his smile widened, believing he was about to witness her final downfall. Little did he know that he was about to face his own trial. As the hearing progressed, Richard's smile began to fade. With each new piece of evidence presented, with each witness that came forward, his facade of confidence cracked a little more. The climactic moment came when Elizabeth stood up to testify. With a clear and firm voice, she recounted not only her own story of manipulation and deception, but also unraveled the complex web of corruption that Richard had woven over the years. "Your Honor," Elizabeth concluded, "what you see before you is not just the case of a manipulated company. It's the tip of the iceberg of a conspiracy that has affected countless lives, that has corrupted institutions, and that has mocked justice for far too long." As Elizabeth spoke, federal agents entered the room, arresting several of those present who had been implicated in the investigation. Richard, seeing his world crumbling around him, tried to flee, only to be stopped at the door. "Richard Blackwood," Detective Thompson announced, "you're under arrest for fraud, market manipulation, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy." As Richard was handcuffed and led out of the room, his shouts of protest mixed with the murmur of astonishment from those present. Elizabeth, exhausted but triumphant, slumped into her seat, immediately surrounded by the arms of her family. "It's over," Andrew whispered, kissing her hair. "It's really over." Emma, with tears of joy, hugged them both. "We did it, together." In the days and weeks that followed, the repercussions of the Sinclair Blackwood case spread throughout the country. Politicians resigned, companies were investigated, and the judicial system underwent a thorough review. For Elizabeth Years, however, the sweetest victory wasn't Richard's downfall or the vindication of her name. It was the opportunity to truly start anew, this time with her family by her side. 6 months after the trial, Elizabeth found herself once again in her office, watching the sunset over the city. But this time, she wasn't alone. Andrew worked at a nearby desk, having left his old job to join the family business. Emma, on her college break, sat on the couch, reviewing cases for her summer internship at the charitable foundation Elizabeth had established to help victims of corporate fraud. "What are you thinking about?" Andrew asked. Noticing Elizabeth's distant look, she smiled, her eyes shining with a mixture of nostalgia and hope. "About how much everything has changed, about how fortunate I am." "We are," Emma corrected, joining her parents by the window. Elizabeth nodded, embracing her family. "Yes, we are." As the sun set over Los Angeles, Elizabeth Sinclair reflected on the incredible journey her life had been. She had lost so much, but she had also gained more than she ever thought possible. Her memory, though still fragile in some aspects, was full of new, happy memories. Her business empire, now run with integrity and purpose, was flourishing. And most importantly, she had the unconditional love of her family. The road hadn't been easy, and she knew there would still be challenges ahead. Her medical condition, although stable for now, remained a constant concern. But for the first time in many years, Elizabeth Sinclair looked to the future with hope and determination, because now she knew that no matter what obstacles life put in her path, she had the strength, love, and truth on her side. And with that, she was ready to face anything that fate had in store for her.